Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started at today's meeting. I think it was originally scheduled for the juvenile department update, but I think we'll do that later and go right into the emergency operations report.
Good morning, Commissioners. Joe Kirby. Wanted to just let you know that Matt is going to be giving that report this morning, and I will be assuming the role of County Administrator again today. However, Matt's been so instrumental and involved. I met with him this morning at 7 with a group of others. He briefed me, but he's going to lead the conversation this morning.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Joe. So where we are is, this is a quickly evolving situation, but at the same time, it is a slowly evolving situation, especially as it concerns emergency management functions. So the information we're getting is coming in rapidly and continually, so we're having to constantly looking at what we're planning to do as an organization moving forward. Some of those things that have been discussed yesterday morning in the policy group was the possibility of closing public lobbies to the public, but seeing it still remaining open and having plans for that to happen. I did receive responses from the directors that they can make that happen if needed. The Sheriff's Office in particular has been in that situation for a while. I can tell you that from what he has to say here, bear with me as I get to his response, they've drastically changed the way they have to conduct business. The joint public lobby shared with the city is closed. They're managing citizen responses through a phone system that pages them. They have several non-sworn deputies currently working remotely. So they've done those things. And they're, with probation and parole, they're focusing on high risk and limited clients entering their lobby. So some have already taken this step, but I think theirs was taken specifically regarding around the city-county joint. I've received some emails from Lynn McKee and Lori Stara about some of their concerns, and we're working through those to kind of address them. But with the fairgrounds in particular, the majority of the reservations have been canceled, as you can well imagine. But we're still working through the RV park pieces of that. And then also with the parks, with the other events scheduled at some of the outlying areas, like the Bezell Education Center, the guard station, the house, and so on and so forth. Lori has made the decision to close the Bezell Center until at least May 1st. She had some that were scheduled in April, but they canceled, or they were scheduled for later in the year. The Salmon Berry isn't set to open until the 1st of May. So those things are going on, but that was the biggest thing as far as policy that has come forward at this point. And I'm not sure what other information you guys are looking for is regarding an update. If it's concerning our efforts, the EOC is up and running. It is staffed with both city and county personnel. They've gone into their second 48-hour rotation. So the first group of people have rotated out at this point. The second group is rotating in this morning. Brian Lee has assumed the incident commander role and will continue in that role.
Matt?
Yes, sir.
Back to Bezell and I assume other parks. When you say closed, you mean the building, the park itself?
The park itself is
the
open for
trails
use and trails, but it's more the buildings and things like that,
Okay.
just for the people coming together, the gathering piece.
Right.
But all the natural areas and enjoying the outdoors and things like that is still open for public consumption.
Okay, I think that, need to make that clear that buildings are closed, park.
Yeah, the park itself is open, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Lori's not looking at doing any of that type of stuff. It's more of the buildings and so on and so forth.
And last time I talked to Lynn McKee, she was, I think, developing a policy for refunds or how to handle deposits that have been made for events that are being canceled.
The decision that was, we decided to do, that we came to, was to refund all money.
Okay.
We're not holding deposits
A little bit louder.
louder, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We have decided to refund all money, and we're not holding even a deposit. We're just allowing those people to reschedule.
Great.
We all made these, so that's kind of the right thing to do. It's out of everybody's hands at this point.
Yep.
So yeah, the operations center is moving forward. Charlie and his bunch, they're continuing to monitor and send out the updates and so on and so forth. We don't have any confirmed cases with feet on the ground in Benton County. The two that we do have are in Washington. They contracted the virus in Washington, and they are remaining in Washington. And that's all I'll stand for questions if you have any. But
On the EOC, the hours of operation are 8 to 5, 5 days a week, is that?
yes, as far as I know, the operations are just during normal business hours at this point. I do believe they'll have somebody there over the weekend, but I'll defer to Leah.
So I can speak to that. The Emergency Operations Center is on a 48-hour shift, but the staff are not physically present outside the hours of 8 to 5. And so there are people monitoring, but not physically on site outside of those hours.
So I mean, they're on call
Yes.
status? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from either of the other commissioners that I may answer?
Do you have a sense for how many tests are pending or where we stand that way?
Yes, I can state we have approximately a dozen or so tests pending.
And we are not having any issues so far with capacity at any of our medical facilities?
I would want to defer that to Sherilyn Dahl, but from my understanding, we are implementing continuity of operations plans at all of our community health centers.
Yeah, I am aware of the plans that have been made there and the contingency plans. I guess what I was wondering about more was the Samaritan, the hospital in particular, given the fact that they are also clearly the primary hospital for Lincoln and Lynn, especially Lynn County. Thanks.
I can chime in on that. I know that the Samaritan has canceled all walk-ins, all elective surgeries. They are in a pretty good position at this point to accept any COVID-19 patients that may come in. Of course, that is on March 19. That may very well change, a week from today. But right now, they are in pretty good position.
That's excellent. That's yours.
Commissioners, I can interject just a little bit regarding the Emergency Operations Center. I did have a conversation with Mark Shepard last night, and he and I are going to be meeting hopefully later today to resolve discussions surrounding the EOC structure, the incident command, as well as expenditures that the EOC will be incurring. And Vance and Matt and Mary Otley have been involved in a conversation over the last couple of days, trying to come to an agreement surrounding an MOU that helps provide a little bit more structure and clarity. Mark and I will be meeting to discuss that later today. So I just wanted to make you aware that we had plans to try and resolve some, what I would say, some points of discussion at this time.
And the context is that we're in uncharted territory as far as city and county operations.
I would definitely say we're in uncharted waters. We do have the NIMS ICS structure that we've been trained in to fall back on. which helps provide guidance and direction regarding structure. Oftentimes in situations like this, the discussion comes down to who pays for what and who has what spending authority in a joint EOC environment. I don't know if the city and the county have ever had a joint EOC prior to this. I know in the last 2.5 years we haven't had one to this degree, but we are in uncharted waters and trying to figure out how to dance with one another so we can have sustain this event. This is not a 24-hour event or a 1-week event. This is one that we're going to have to sustain emergency operations for an indefinite period of time. So I do think it is different than what we're normally used to responding to.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and I will chime in that I do not believe we have had a joint EOC in the past, because the emergency declarations we've had, and I think there were two. One was the flood last spring, and I want to say it was the fires we had with all the smoke maybe 5-6 years ago. That was so fast, it arose, we had to respond, and then it dissipated so quickly. There really wasn't a need to have the joint EOC. This is a very different situation. And I will echo what Joe just said, is that the joint EOC is operating, I think, pretty much as intended, even though I think, as I mentioned in the email I sent to y'all, that plan is still a draft plan, but I think everybody's operating as if it was in place, which is a good thing.
Well, and the city and the county have been practicing
Exactly.
for at least a year, and so have some background in how to operate, but now it's real.
And just to add more into the cost piece, that has, I think Joe is underselling it. That has been a significant bone of contention for the last week. So at this point, I think we have wording that Mary Otley and Nancy Brewer, the finance directors for the two respective jurisdictions, have come up with that seems to address the concern that the city of Corvallis had. However, chalk it up under the category, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. When Mary sent out the wording she drafted, she sent it to Nancy Brewer and myself. I sent back revisions via email, but just after Mary sent her email out, the city's email server went down. So Nancy and the city hadn't seen the language or the revision I sent yesterday afternoon. So they have not had a chance to review it, to my knowledge. I got a call from Jim Brewer this morning asking where it was. So we have language we think we're closing in on, but we can't get it to people.
Is the city back up and running?
I don't know, nobody's responding to my emails.
Okay. Good to know.
Commissioners, also just to interject a little bit, as you know, I just returned last night from vacation. A couple of things that I'll be focusing on over the next couple of days. Matt and I are spending the larger part of the day together today. My highest priority is to work with the city to resolve any outstanding differences regarding the EOC structure, roles, and financial spending authority and responsibility. So that's my highest priority for today. Mark and I have committed that we at some point will meet today to review those issues. That meeting has not been scheduled as of yet. I do believe it's going to be late this afternoon. That's number one. Number two, I'm looking at changing the structure currently in terms of how we're set up administratively, and we'll likely be putting in place an interim structure that does a better job, if you will, of not only supporting the organizational needs, the reporting relationships, and what the board's needs are. I'll probably be shifting a couple of department heads around and providing them new and improved roles to respond to this particular emergency. And what oftentimes can happen is, because there are so many different things that are pulling on us at any given time, our ability to be responsive goes away, and I don't want that to happen. And so Matt and I will be working with others to do a little bit of restructuring that I would call just interim restructuring for some reporting relationships that I think will set us up for success over the next 30 to 60 days. But just I want you to be aware that has not been exactly agreed upon or even identified at this point. I do have some concepts that I will be considering and making a decision on, hopefully before the end of tomorrow, which we in turn would implement at the beginning of next week. To give you an idea of what some of those are, operationally speaking, I'll probably need some assistance operationally. We'll restructure some of the department heads reporting to another person other than myself. We're going to be looking at creating more of a board liaison so that you're getting the communication that you need and your needs met as well. We'll also be looking at formulating a revenue group. We need to be looking out not only short-term but long-term in terms of revenue implications and the county's ability to provide services long-term. That will be a group that we implement by early next week. So there's a number of pieces and parts, but I would say operations, number one, number two, revenues, number three, focusing on our joint EOC with the city of Corvallis. Those are the areas that I'll be focusing on initially. We'll also be making contact and bringing into the fold to a greater degree the other city managers within Benton County.
Along those lines, Matt, yesterday at the policy meeting, I think you asked department heads to list critical services, critical personnel, and that's supposed to be on yours or Joe's desk by the end of today. Is that correct?
I actually had it at the close of business yesterday, and I did receive all of that information. I am compiling it and trying to come up and consolidate it so I have a better understanding and can give a better report. I've read through it, but I didn't really break it down that far to be able to spell it out for you guys today, and I apologize for that.
Oh, no, that's a good start. It fits in with what Joe's talking about of the potential need for shifting personnel and kind of restructuring how we do business so we can keep essential services moving forward.
Commissioners, I can tell you it's a tall order for any local government to sustain an emergency operations center long-term. And so I think we need to make sure that we're not only looking at what the short-term needs are, but how do we sustain the emergency operations center in our county operations themselves long-term. It will be a challenge. You know, we do have a sizable workforce, but we need to anticipate that workforce is going to be impacted by the coronavirus. So I don't want you to be surprised when we come to you with various difficulties that may be arriving that are related to resource constraints. The good thing is between the city and the county, assuming that we can work together well, I believe that those resources, we're in an improved situation when we have a joint EOC. Let me just put it that way, because we have more access to resources.
Well, and with the EOC model, you walk into the room and, well, I used to do these functions, and well, today you have different priorities for what you do, and I think that's a good model for not just the EOC but countywide. That things may be different, look different going forward.
We are meeting with the HR director today, Tracy Martineau, as well as our finance director, and the purpose of that meeting is to discuss our essential personnel versus non-essential personnel. I can tell you that Having gone through these situations before in other communities, it's critical that we have access to as many county employees as we can get to sustain a response. And I do expect that we will need extreme flexibility in terms of how we can use folks in response to this.
Well, excuse me, I know earlier in this operation, there was a request for information on essential personnel, and one department came back and said, well, everybody's in my department's essential. And I think we've moved beyond that approach to working a little harder at defining priorities.
And I do think that when you talk about essential personnel, the way that I look at it is there's two different aspects of that. One is, are those personnel essential to the operations, day-to-day operations of that department? That's one aspect. The other aspect is, are those employees essential to the operations of the county overall and the community overall? And that goes to your point, Commissioner Malone, about how we can use employees differently and in different roles. And so that flexibility is really necessary as the county administrator. I literally look at every county employee as essential personnel. The department head may not view it that way because they may be looking at it just from their department's perspective. But as a county administrator, knowing that we need access to the greatest amount of resources possible, I view things a little bit different.
We need flexibility going ahead.
Commissioner Ogier was trying to jump in.
Commissioner Ogier.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you're thinking about things in those three buckets with kind of the operational, administrative, the revenue, and EOC and communications. And I was wondering a little bit more, I guess you haven't dived into it yet since you're just back, but about the status of union relationships and whether Tracy's had an opportunity to talk to our unions about some of this flexibility that you are clearly seeing need for. I'm familiar with what's going on within, say, CSC and COG with that regard, but not what we're doing internally.
We have what we call our Labor Management Advisory Committee that's scheduled for later this afternoon. It's just by happenstance that it happens to be today. And I can tell you that I've been part of some email chains between ourselves administratively in conjunction with AFSCME representatives. And it relates to several of the topics I've mentioned in terms of employees and flexibility and how we can use them. So I can tell you that that will be a primary point of discussion this afternoon. When we meet with LMAC, it's primarily ONA, our nurses union, as well as AFSCME. BCDSA doesn't normally participate in those. However, we'll be talking with the sheriff separately.
We still don't have a contract with the BSA, do we?
No, we do have a contract with BCDSA at this point.
Yeah.
That was approved by the board, I believe, back in the end of January, beginning of February, off the top of my head. So we do have a
Okay.
collective bargaining agreement in place at this point in time with all three of our unions.
I must have just gone right past me.
Yeah, actually, it was a lengthy negotiation, primarily due to some challenges with scheduling. That contract did expire last July, and we operated under the one that was that had expired up until January, when we had the new one negotiated and approved by the board.
All right.
So what time, I thought that LMAC meeting had been canceled.
It has not been canceled relative to our discussions with AFSCME. So there is a meeting that is pending. I believe it's going to be a go-to meeting that is still scheduled for 3:30. A meeting with Tracy Martineau at 11:30 this morning, and I'll be able to confirm that. And then we can inform you, Commissioner Jaramillo, since you're the liaison to LMAC.
Right, and then I can join by phone.
Sure.
Okay,
So you can expect to hear from somebody via email sometime after 11:30.
sure, thank you.
Vance, do you have anything to add to the discussion that you haven't already covered?
No, I've got some information on some of the other counties and what they have done in terms of closures to the public and what they're maintaining as their public lobby open, but I didn't think we're quite at that point yet.
Okay, we did, at the policy meeting yesterday, we did talk about public lobbies and what's our status there, Matt?
I believe that all the departments would be able to shut down their public lobbies moving forward. They'd either do them by appointment, handle telephone calls, and things of that nature. I can speak to my lobby in particular. We'll put up a sign that says, hey, if you need our assistance, please call this number. And we still have some people in the office that can handle that. And I believe that was the majority's feeling, that they could still conduct business even if the public lobbies were closed.
And at this point, now I have some information I can add. Generally speaking, and I'm looking at Lincoln, Multnomah, Wallowa, Tillamook, and Clackamas as examples. By and large, they're keeping their sheriff's office open, their health department's open, and the DA's office, because the DA's office, as you know, is tied to the state courts, although the state courts have dramatically curtailed their activities and their scheduled appearances, they've not shut down. So the DA really is, and don't tell John this, but he's the tail on that dog. So wherever that dog goes, that the DA follows.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask Matt, if we do close lobbies, does it have to be a one-size-fits-all, or kind of like we're doing with personnel, set priorities and say we can close these 6 and these 3 stay open, or
Yeah, you guys can make any decision as far as that goes. It doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all. We can individualize it to how it fits. You know, like I said, the sheriff's office has already kind of curtailed theirs. The DA's office, they've got to remain open. But yeah, the health centers, public health, things like that.
2 of the health center facilities, I think Charlene was saying that they were looking at keeping Sweet Home and Lincoln open and closing down the others.
Yes. She sent me her operational plan, and that's kind of the direction that she is moving at this point.
is there a timetable on that?
No, there is not.
But-
There very well could be, let me rephrase that, there very well could be, I just don't have the date off the top of my head.
Right, and Charlene, I think, was going to talk about that with her staff yesterday afternoon.
Because that was our discussion yesterday morning.
Commissioners, my intent is, Matt and I haven't had a lot of time to discuss this aspect of things today. He was consolidating the information from each one of the department heads. My position on it is that the one size does not fit all in this case, and that we likely will be doing some different things depending on which department it is. It's my intent to meet individually with each one of the department heads tomorrow to review the information that they provided, and then hopefully be able to make some determinations before the end of the day tomorrow or early next week about what we will be doing in the case of each one of those departments. I also need input from Vance regarding what some of our legal requirements might be, so we can figure out how we can still meet those and yet curtail operations to the degree that we can.
Okay.
So we will have more information forthcoming either late tomorrow or the first of the day on Monday morning.
Great.
And it appears, based, just looking at this, primary care services effective Monday, March 23rd. So I think that's where they're targeting is Monday. with some of the way they're gonna be triaging things. They've got, it appears, teams set up, staff work zones, those types of things in place at this point.
Okay. Lilia, can you update us on communications and how things look from what you've been working on?
Absolutely. As Matt previously stated, we have 2 cases. Those cases are physically located in Washington County. Yesterday, unfortunately, the Oregon Health Authority released that Benton County had a 3rd case. That was incorrect. That case was actually misidentified. It meant to be a Lynn County case. I got in touch with the Oregon Health Authority public information officers and requested that they change their website and send a correction press release. They, I believe, have changed their website, but they're not issuing a correction press release. They're simply correcting that error in today's press release when they announce whatever cases today may bring. So we are currently working very hard to combat that rumor. We don't want to appear as though we're not being transparent about our number of cases. We've committed that we will communicate immediately when we have any cases. And so unfortunately, this misinformation that was published by the Oregon Health Authority has impacted that. And so as part of our response, we're issuing daily video updates. And so yesterday, the main topic of our video update was that that 3rd case was incorrect. That's a Lynn County case.
Well, and I think that shows how critical communications are. There's a lot of misinformation and floating around, and we need to identify trusted sources
Absolutely.
where you can go for good information, and OHA is one of those sources. So
Yeah, so it's difficult when one of those trusted sources, unfortunately, has an error, but we're working very diligently to communicate about that.
last time I checked, we're human. And,
Exactly.
So within the county, the coordination with the city, OSU, Samaritan.
Absolutely. So the Benton County Joint Information Center was activated in late February, and we've been working with the Health Department Operations Centers since that time. And so since that time, we have been in daily coordination with Oregon State University, and more recently, I would say we're in daily coordination with Good Samaritan as well. We have a daily check-in call at 2 p.m. with our local school district and members of our liaison officers. So we are in the Joint Information Center really trying to keep the communication networks tight and leverage the liaison officer group in the Emergency Operations Center as much as possible to do more of the group and organization-specific reach-outs.
And as far as you can tell, things are going relatively well as far as all being on the same page and
I believe so.
Being careful.
I believe so, yes. We initially issued all of our communication on the internet, on websites, social media, and so now we are really trying to reach members of the community that don't frequently access the internet or utilize social media. So our harm reduction team in the health department is utilizing some paper handbills to provide prevention information to individuals experiencing homelessness. We also, in partnership with our sheriff's office, have issued paper flyers out to the rural communities in Benton County, so community gathering places, whether it's, say, John Boy's in Philomath or other sort of community gathering places in the rural communities. So we are trying to ensure consistent messaging, whether the platform is print, social media, video, whatever the case may be. And we're also trying to utilize multiple platforms to reach as many people as possible.
Okay, and for the foreseeable future, you plan to be based out of the meeting room at Sunset?
For the foreseeable future, we are currently in that county facility.
Okay.
Commissioner Oshiro? Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the use of the telephone hotline and how the staffing of that is going, and whether we are continuing to receive as many calls? And then lastly, one of the questions I got yesterday is whether we are addressing only specifically health-related calls on that hotline, or whether it's any kind of county questions with respect to our COVID response.
Great question. We initially stood up a phone bank for the purpose of receiving general COVID-19 calls. We found that we were receiving most of our health-related calls through the health department primary phone number or through the community health center's front desk line. So we created, in the health department operations center, a triage system to handle the phone calls that were coming directly into the health department and the community health centers. Based on that triage and what they were requesting information on, we then would direct the calls to 211 at the state or to our specific Benton County phone bank. That process initiated, I want to say, approximately March 3rd. Since that time, we have steadily seen an increase in calls. So as of yesterday, in fact, I was in discussions about collapsing the health department triage phone system that we have developed into the county's phone bank, and then extending the hours of the county's phone bank. So right now, the hours of the phone bank are Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. We are hoping to, effective Monday the 23rd, I believe, expand the hours of the phone bank to 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. In terms of the questions that they're able to answer, it's typically going to be COVID-19 Benton County questions. However, we are in receipt of talking points and questions that the Oregon Health Authority is providing to us to ensure that we have consistent messaging with our state partners. And we are developing messaging really daily as we see what concerns and rumors are floating around online or being sent to us directly. So the topics with which the phone bank can respond to, I think, is actually going to evolve on a day-by-day basis. At this point, we're not answering questions about other county departments and their continuity of operations, but it is possible as the situation evolves that we may do so.
That would be helpful. I think it's really useful for people to have one point of contact and one place to go for that kind of information.
Got it. Thank you.
I also know that there are people out there that will be happy to help volunteer for this purpose. And so if we need more volunteers, we should think about strategies there too.
Certainly.
That was going to be my question is, what's the plan for staffing the expanded hours?
Not typically, I apologize. The Healthy Communities team has been managing, in the health department, has been managing the health department phone tree. And so that staff that has been managing the health department phone tree is then going to be added into the phone bank. So the same people will be answering the phones who were originally answering them before.
And the idea is that's adequate staffing going forward, that there's...
At this point, that is adequate staffing, but as the situation evolves and we see a higher volume of calls, we may need to expand.
Okay. Back to your transparency concern or issue, that identifying that Benton County does have a case, say in the future, but no individual name goes with that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's critical to separate out the number from the individual.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because the term transparent gets thrown around a lot, and I want to know everything, all the information you have, and we have restrictions on how much information we can provide.
Yeah, I'd love to direct that question to Vance Crony to provide
Yeah, that's an easy one.
legal insight.
That's an easy one. That's an absolute hard no. If we get a request from the newspaper, we get a request from citizens to say, oh, we understand you've got a positive case, who is it?
And where are they?
And we're gonna say, we cannot tell you that. Federal law, state law prohibits that, even in a declaration of emergency. Our declaration of emergency, the state's declaration of emergency does not trump the privacy laws.
Okay.
So that's an easy one.
HEPA, is that?
That's the federal law.
Right.
Yep. Yep. Prevents disclosure of PHI, personal health information.
Okay. And maybe ahead of time, get that information out that we have no cases, and we will let you know when if we do, but there will be no names attached to that.
You know, I guess I'm not
information.
even certain that we're getting names. If we were to get a report from Samaritan or from the state, from Quest's testing, I'm not certain we'd get the name. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know.
Well, I think a couple of weeks ago, seems like a long time ago, a county north of us, I think, did release names. And I don't know how that happened, but I think it's important to emphasize that we can't do that.
Right.
We shouldn't do that, we can't do that, we won't do
We
that.
won't
We
do that.
won't do
We
that.
will not
Yeah.
do that,
We will
right.
not do
And,
it.
and I'll be happy if anybody objects to that from the public and then wants to put in a complaint. I'll be happy to take those calls. Those are, like I said, those are pretty easy. Zan, I saw you waving your hand.
Yes, and I don't know whether there's any kind of an agenda that you all have kind of abruptly tried to lay out, so I apologize if I throw things out completely out of order. But I have a couple of other questions and things that I would like to cover, and I'm not even sure how long we set aside for this, so just want to throw out a couple of things. One is that I would love to know more about how the sheriff's office is adapting, given the fact that they've got people in self-quarantine, in terms of their coverage in the county and temporal coverage, and whether or not we have changed our jail operations at all, since that's also been a major topic of conversation among commissioners and even in the press already. So those are a couple questions. The third is that I would love at some point during our conversation to talk a little bit more about roles for commissioners and how we can divvy up some of the responsibility for listening on different ongoing calls, and how we can channel that information into administration and EOC. How can we work more together without affecting any of our quorum issues, all of that, especially not being involved in the day-to-day and in the policy committee. I'm struggling to figure out how to best help.
Powers are. So Zan, and I think Joe's writing those down so we can jump into those, but I just want to clarify for you and for Pat and for Annabelle that because we have declared emergency, it is not necessary for a quorum to be in effect at a public meeting for the chair to make a decision. And if the chair is not available, the vice chair can make a decision. So we really do have a great deal of flexibility in making on-the-fly decisions that are not driven by a noticed meeting schedule. So just remember that we are in a funky time period where decisions on behalf of Benton County may be made by an individual commissioner because of the declaration of emergency. So I think the objective here is to try to regularly maintain these meetings so that you all can stay as informed as possible. And I think I think that goes to what you're talking about, is how do you stay in the loop on so many things going on?
Commissioner Ozero, a couple of things. My understanding regarding our agenda today is that Matt, you were anticipating the sheriff was going to be here at 10? Is that correct?
I don't know if he was planning on being here at 10 or not. I know that Commissioner Ozero had made a comment to me the other night that he could possibly be coming for an update, but I don't have 100% sure that he is coming.
So, Nick, why don't you step out and try and contact him to see if he does plan on being here at 10? Commissioner Ozero, he would be best, of course, to speak to your questions regarding the sheriff's office and the jail, so I'd like to hold those here for a few minutes to see if he does intend to be here. My hope is that he does. One of the questions that I had for the commissioners this morning was really about the expectations and needs that the commissioners have. I will tell you how typically, and I think this was covered under the NIMS ICS training, but typically when it comes to incident command, elected officials don't have a role specifically within the incident command structure other than off to the side as a policy group. And so there will be interactions with the board where we bring larger policies to you that we'll be asking you for input on or decisions on. So that's one primary role. Another primary role is your responsibility to the constituents, and communicating with your constituents is another role. It's important that the community hear at times directly from the board and the commissioners. And so I think that that is something that we need to maybe do a better job of. But as it relates to the incident command structure, I think what we need to do, and you heard me reference it a little earlier, is we need to create a pipeline for the commissioners so that you have the ability to take issues and concerns that you're hearing or that you have, and being able to interject those into a process that then you get responses to, either from administration or from incident command, whichever is the most appropriate. Nick and Matt and I plan on meeting at 11 this morning, and that conversation was specifically for what do we need to do for the board to make sure that the communication is occurring and you're getting the questions that you need answered. So now would be a really good time for you to provide input to us so that we can take that off and figure out ways to make those improvements. But it was a specific topic we discussed at 7 this morning that we wanted to bring up with you.
And before we get into that, just really quick, I just got off the phone with Under Sheriff Riddler. He is going to come over and give you guys an update here shortly.
Great. Zan, the one thing I had along the lines of roles for commissioners is our liaison function, kind of maybe firming up what we're currently doing, and making sure that the list is well covered, and if any adjustments need to be made, that we do that. But I've got my 11 by 17 colored sheet here, and I will be going over that later today, just to make sure that I'm on top of the committees and assignments that I have.
And Commissioners, go ahead, Commissioner Ozero, I see you waving your hand.
I just wanted to, at some point, be able to share what I have been doing, and so that people know what I've been attending and where I've been liaising so far, and then talk about moving forward and what that might look like whenever we're ready for that. So go ahead, Joe.
I think if you would like to discuss that now, that's fine.
Okay, as you know, because of the Hope Board, I've been very involved there, and thank you to Matt and Nick and Brian for pulling Julie Arena into the role that she's playing with EOC now in terms of coordinating with the services to homeless service providers and folks at risk of being homeless. I think that's going to be really important. It's very reassuring so far to our nonprofits and other agencies that are working with folks that are homeless, that there is someone there and that there's a central point of coordination. It's going to take a little bit of time to work out the wrinkles, but there's been great feedback so far. The other is that before all of this started, I was working with Brian and Dave Busby and Kate Portia and her team on essential function 18, recovery. So I have also been in touch pretty regularly with Kate and with Simon Date and some of the other folks about some of the economic effects and those kinds of issues as well. So touch base every couple of days on that. And then the other thing I've been doing is making sure that I attend any of the commissioners' phone calls and updates. And I'll probably also be sitting in on the Oregon Housing and Community Services monthly and the weekly call as well, just so I can keep the pulse on what funding streams are there for the housing related issues. So that's what I've been doing so far, and then just trying to take all of the feedback I get from community members and funnel it to someone, and that's where I haven't been quite sure who to direct my contact to, and I've been wary of over communicating because I know how much information all of you that have been involved with the EOC are getting, and so I'm looking forward to settling those communications.
Commissioner Hosro, by tomorrow we will have a protocol for the commissioners so that you know exactly how you should input those issues and concerns into administration as well as incident command.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is really important because you are, I'm sure, getting lots of feedback out there in the community. The other thing that I think we need to resolve is the situation regarding the liaisons. We want to make sure that we're not, that communication is not conflicting because we have liaisons within incident command that have a specific purpose. And we want to make sure that the board is not getting at odds with their roles and responsibilities. I think we need to work with them to provide a little bit more delineation between their responsibilities versus the board's responsibilities.
Yeah. What I would say there is that I have not, what I have done so far, especially on the two issue areas that I've mentioned, is that I am sending all information through Julie Arena on the housing and homelessness. I'm sending all information through Kate Portia and her team for any of those other issues. So I don't feel that so far I'm giving any conflicting information. And what I've been doing is directing community members to those points
Sure.
of contact, rather than directing anyone anywhere else. So, so far, I think that's worked pretty well in terms of that type of coordination. The last area I wanted to mention was criminal justice systems improvement and the status of that whole process. We did have an ops team meeting on Tuesday with Ari and with the DLR folks, and it went well. DLR is full steam ahead because they can do so much of the pre-design work independently and analytically at this point, in this stage of the process. They can do their next set of meetings in terms of the space planning side of the programming remotely by GoToMeeting, Zoom, so it's not an issue. Ari and I were both concerned about the ability to maintain momentum there, and I think the biggest question on our side is going to be bandwidth internally to be able to digest what they're producing for us. So I'm glad you're back, Joe, so that we can have some of those discussions. And I know that Ari really needs to talk to you on a couple of those issues.
You bet.
Rather than.
I think some of the restructuring that I plan to do will help ensure that we can still have the necessary capacity to move some of those key initiatives of the board forward. One of those, in this case, being the criminal justice, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, one that I would hate to see us lose too much momentum on. A lot of other things can fall away.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious this is a work in progress. Things have, a week ago, yesterday, I think is when things really changed, and the NBA canceling their season, and I think that woke up a lot of people. So this is serious, and what's that, March 11th, and things have been changing rapidly since then. But two of your questions concern law enforcement, and we have Under Sheriff Riddler here. So the questions were, you have at least 5 people that were exposed to the
Correct, potential exposure, but we got information back yesterday that the individual that they treated at the event was not positive
Okay.
for the coronavirus.
Great.
They are back to work now. We had the deputies that were also at the academy in Salem that had a potential exposure, and they were also not. It was not a confirmed case of that, and so they are also back to work. So we have nobody out self-quarantined or.
Great.
So we have better staffing for law enforcement.
Okay. Can everybody hear Under Sheriff Riddler?
That was Greg, yeah, I can hear him.
Okay. I can speak louder if it helps, Dan, but we're good.
Thank you.
The jail is operating normally under the conditions, of course. We have no illnesses there for employees or inmates. We're doing well there. P&P is also doing well with their check-ins and everything as far as mostly phone contact. And we do have the work crew out today, and they are being monitored, making sure they're told if they're sick, don't come out. But we're evaluating that process over the weekend and seeing if we're going to continue that. But so far, it appears to be adequate screening, shall we say, before they go out there. So everything's running pretty well. Our call volume is, I would say, about average. We're not experiencing a great deal of calls out there, and we are doing precautions out there, calling people before we show up at their house, asking them some simple questions about their status, if they have anybody in the home sick, or if anybody's sick out there. So right now we're doing very well. Our staffing issue was our main concern. We had a lot of deputies working a lot of hours of overtime, but that seems to be a little bit minimized right now, so we're doing well.
I know you have priorities for which calls you respond to physically. Do you have plans in place for changing those priorities so that fewer responses physically and more monitoring by phone?
I would say we prioritize them the same as always, except the response is going to be a little bit different. If we can take it over the phone, we will. If we do need to respond in person, we're going to take a look at the history, which we always do in the first place of any resident we respond to, but also ask a couple extra questions before we get there if we're able to. If it's an emergency response, sometimes that's not going to happen, but the deputies are aware of precautions they could take before they respond to unknown issues, which is always part of our workload, unknown situations that we're not sure what we're getting into. So it's again, we have a very positive group, and the jail's operating very well. We're doing very well, and of course Brian Lee is working very hard at the emergency operations. So we're all busy, but for right now, it's been very normal, if that's a good word for how we're responding. We're always ready for the unknown, and now we've got a little bit more extra in the unknown, but we have that mentality to prepare for that.
Do you have many kind of normal vacancies in especially patrol?
No, actually, we did with the potential exposures, but now I think we're doing pretty well. We did have one person graduate from the academy just in time, and we had one starting Monday that was sent back to us, and she is in training right now. Part of field training is what we call it.
Right.
And she's working this morning, full uniform going out there, but being supervised closely by a full-time deputy. And that's again, that's normal. If the deputy that just graduated is going to be in field training, so we've got 2 in field training. We've got the deputies to do that with them now, and so it's very good for them to see what abnormal conditions are like, because we have to deal with that.
Okay, thank you.
Greg, I
Sure.
just want to add that I've had several communication with John Devaney, the jail commander, and the jail has implemented no in-person visits for the inmates.
Correct.
And they have moved the the consultation with attorneys to the visitation room, which has the glass separator, to try to separate the inmate population from outside contacts to the greatest extent possible. Because as you know, anything that comes into the inmate population by necessity is going to implicate the staff as well. So I think John implemented that on Monday, maybe Tuesday.
Yep. And that goes along with our protocol statewide. I will vouch for OSSA, Oregon Sheriff's Association. We are meeting via phone on a very consistent basis, and we're all following the same, because we all have the same concerns. It is one of these situations, and I told this to Brian Lee yesterday. I said, when we prepare for these emergency situations, it's usually local or statewide. This is nationwide, worldwide, and it limits our ability to ask for outside resources. But we can communicate, and we can talk among the Sheriff's Association. What do we need to do for jail protocol? What do we need to do for parole protocol? What do we need to do law enforcement protocol? And that has been very, I think, efficient and effective, since we're all on the same page, statewide, trying to run the jails, trying to run parole, trying to run law enforcement, because we all have the same issue. I know I was like Joe. I was on vacation, but not out of the country, and I got a call from one of the counties in Eastern Oregon saying, "What are you doing for this? Can you send me what you're doing?" And this was before Captain Devaney had the opportunity to get back, and I was organizing that conversation back here so we could all be on the same page statewide. And it's very important that we do that as law enforcement, as probation, and as a jail, so that we all practice what we're trying to do to protect all of us.
Yeah, and just one last point on that. If all of the Oregon jails are operating and adjusting in the same manner, it limits all of our liability, because it's not as if Benton County is an outlier doing something different. So the communication statewide is incredibly beneficial, because it does enhance operations during the emergency, and it also protects staff and protects the county from liability in terms of consistent treatment across the board for all inmates.
And we've been relying on the county council's well.
Heck yes, of course.
I'm sorry, Lily.
Oh, Commissioner Oger.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Sheriff.
Thank you. I have just a couple questions. One is, when you talk about trying to decide whether a call can be handled by telephone or in person, is that something that, a decision that's being made at the 911 dispatch center, or is that a decision that's made after you receive the call from dispatch? Or tell me a little bit more about how that's working. And then the second piece is, if we were to go to the next phase of social distancing and get that isolate in place requirement, would the sheriff's office then be responsible, along with the CPD, for enforcing that?
Oh boy.
Wow, you really have a.
Oh boy, that.
You want to check that one, Vance?
I'll start.
Okay. Vance did send us out some information that we'd used in the past about quarantine, but shelter in place is a little bit different. But
Yeah, so this has been a pretty robust topic of conversation amongst county councils, and I'm sure amongst city attorneys. It's one thing for the governor or for a local governing body to issue a shelter in place or even a ban on large gatherings. It's another thing for those kind of directives to be enforced. And I think to a very large extent, law enforcement, governments are relying on people to comply because we simply don't have the resources to go out and police that specific topic. Now, I would guess that if there was a flagrant violation of, let's say we have a shelter-in-place order, and let's say where it was somebody's having a wedding, and they say, you know, we've had this wedding planned for a year. We're gonna bring the 400 guests in from all around the West Coast. That may be a situation where law enforcement goes and says, absolutely not. We're breaking you all up. But if you have a couple of families who are gonna wander down to the mini mart instead of sheltering in place, I can't imagine that is going to justify a response from CPD or BCSO. It's again, we are really going to rely on people doing the right thing.
And that's exactly how we would approach it as well. And then as far as the 911, it's going to be a triage. I can't say it. The situation where dispatch is going to look at it first. They're going to receive the call and make a determination and ask questions. They have a protocol to go through. I don't have their 911 protocol in front of me, but I do know that they will review the calls for whatever the situation is going to be. That is in a perfect world. If we get a 911 call where they're screaming, yelling, and we're unable to ascertain exactly, and this happens all the time, they can't ascertain what the situation is, they're going to send us. And we're going to try to make a determination on our response. So yes, 911 will take a look and see how the police response will be, and then the deputies will make a determination of what the deputy response is going to be. And it's going to be evolving depending on the calls. And that's my favorite description of police work sometimes. It depends, because every situation is going to be different. If we have a screaming, yelling match in a private residence where we can't determine if it's a domestic, if it's a situation where somebody's breaking into a house or anything else like that, dispatch is not going to ask them a bunch of questions about their history and everything else like that. We're going to respond and try to determine that proper response, but we're still going to be there. So it's going to be, it depends on what the call is and how the call comes in and what's discussed. It's not going to be, this is what you're going to do every time, every way, and it's going to be followed, because that's not the nature of our work sometimes. But for right now, it's been pretty good. Dispatch to make a determination, and then we go. Does that
Okay.
answer?
One last follow-up question on that, and that is, I know that before all of the coronavirus challenges hit us, we were concerned about the phone system at 911 center, and I haven't heard anything from CPD or anyone else about the funds available to address that question. Has there been any progress, or do we know what we're doing there?
We did have a meeting, and it was very apparent that they are aware that the funding is going to be down the road. Vance has been very forthcoming with his information on that and sharing that information. It's still the thought that it's going to happen faster, but again, I don't think we have a anticipation that it's going to be fix all cure immediately. It's going to take some down the road, and I think CPD is on the same way with 911, same thing, that we're all working together to make this happen and on the schedule that Vance has given us as far as that. So it hasn't been an issue that I've been aware of lately.
Okay.
Getting too antsy, is that sort of are we getting antsy about it?
Okay, yeah, I know that the Chief Sassaman was concerned about failure of the phone system, that it's patched together at this point, and sooner's better than later in terms of replacing it. But yeah, okay, I just wanted to know whether it's still an issue.
We haven't had any issues with 911 as far as I'm aware of.
Okay.
Thank you. That's our attorney. Yeah.
Greg, on the 911 center, how has the call volume changed, and how are dispatch operator
I don't feel really
staffing?
comfortable answering that because I'm not aware of their issues with CPD. I'm trying
Okay.
to, like I said, I've been on vacation so a little bit, but I'm coming back. But I haven't noticed as far as Benton County Sheriff's Office or the jail increased volume of activity. It's been pretty normal. From what I can tell, there hasn't been a huge influx of 911 activity.
Okay.
But again, I'm not all up to speed on what 911 has been doing and CPD has been doing, so I apologize, but I'm still localizing my
Sure.
attempts at making sure we're got it covered and listening. I mean, right now, actually, we're on two separate radio channels right now, and I don't even know much what's going on in the city except what pops up on my computer screen, so I haven't seen a great deal of activity as far as in bringing people to jail. I haven't seen a great deal of activity of problems with them as with us. It doesn't seem to be impacting us on a large volume at this time.
Good. And staffing levels at the 911 dispatch?
Again, I can't tell you.
Okay.
I really don't, really am not familiar with
Okay.
their levels at this time.
We have some people on the phone. Maybe start with Tracy Martineau. Do you have anything to add at this point?
She's coming.
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute there, Commissioner Mullen. Well, one of the important updates is that the president signed the coronavirus bill last night, and so that will go into effect in 15 days. I'll be sending a communication out right after this meeting to the policy group. I can copy the commissioners on that communication.
Okay.
And then I just want to clarify that the meeting with AFSCME today, this afternoon, is a response to AFSCME's request to bargain the same language that they bargained with the Department of Administrative Services of the state. And that is why you saw cancellation of LMAC and immediately a meeting scheduled for bargaining team.
So Tracy,
So LMAC, it's the bargaining team then.
Yeah.
so Tracy,
Okay.
is Commissioner Jaramillo to be involved in that or not?
No.
But that's what I thought happened
Okay.
in the past, but thank you for clarifying
Just wanted to
that.
clarify.
Happy to do so. I immediately before this meeting this morning, I sent out another policy update that was based on some of the decisions and suggestions that came out of the last policy group meeting.
All right. Anything else?
It also, I think that's it. Those are the highlights.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Luis, do you have anything to contribute to the conversation here?
I don't, thank you.
All right. And Mary Otley.
I don't have anything necessarily. My question is that, Tracy, that new legislation that was signed, it's for employers less than 500, so I just want to make sure we all understand that. That we probably, our odds are good we'll follow it, but I don't know that we necessarily are required to. Is that true?
Mary, it is not true. That's not accurate. It applies to all public employers.
Oh, so, okay, so I didn't see that part of it. I just saw the 500 employees or less.
That's private sector only.
Okay. That's good information to know. And in light of that, I guess when we go into negotiations this afternoon, I think the legislation is more generous than what they initially are requesting, isn't it?
Well, there are several components to their request, without getting into the weeds here.
Right.
So I think it would depend upon with the priority of their interest on whether they would view it as more generous.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nick, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing hasn't been discussed. Thank you for asking.
Okay, I won't even ask John. Anything else on the emergency operations topic?
I just want to pass along to Mary. Mary, I have been going back and forth with Jim Brewer on the language that you crafted and that I revised yesterday. I think we're getting close. When we're done with this meeting, I'm going to send you the most recent version so that hopefully by the time Joe and Mark get together, we can have an understanding in place.
Hey, and Mary, you and I are going to talk about this at 11:30.
Yes.
Commissioners, we will, are going to be meeting, as I said, a little later today, not with the board, but internally. And one of the things we'll be figuring out is who and how we will go about providing you a daily update, either through individual phone calls or emails or what have you. If you have any feedback on that, I'm happy to take it.
Suzanne has feedback.
I don't have any specific feedback on that topic at this point, other than what I've already voiced, but I did want to, before we break, extend a really big thank you to Matt Wetherell for the role he's played for the last couple of weeks, given that most of the time when you stand in as acting county administrator, it's that'll maybe go to an extra meeting or two. This has been much bigger role. So thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah, Matt's done an outstanding job.
Absolutely. I think the policy committee started meeting last Friday? Thursday. So, and then Monday and Wednesday of this week, and
There's another meeting tomorrow morning. I don't remember how far we extended those out to 3 days a week, but Nick's got them scheduled out there for a while, I believe.
okay. And
Thank you, Matt, from me as well. This is Annabelle.
Well, thank you to all three of you for working with me through this, and we got to step up and do what we got to do. So,
well, and I think Matt sets a good example of flexibility. This a couple of weeks ago, this wasn't his job, and for the last couple of weeks, now it is, and he really has stepped up, and there'll be I anticipate a nice smooth transition today from Matt back to Joe, and welcome back, Joe.
Thank you.
Couple things have gone on since you've been gone, but we'll catch you up. As far as the board, our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday the 24th at 9 o'clock. Is that correct?
That appears to be correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And like I said, Pat, I would strongly encourage you all to maintain your at least a weekly, if not twice a week, meeting, just so that you can continue to exchange information effectively.
Okay, and at least have them scheduled. If we don't have anything on the schedule, we can cancel.
Or you can meet quickly and be done. But my expectation is, at least for the next few weeks, there's always going to be something to talk about.
Okay, and probably Tuesday and Thursday kind of schedule, or we may.
You know, when I talked to Teresa the other day, you don't necessarily need to add different meetings. If you have department head meetings, I would utilize those as your check-in points.
Okay.
A point of clarification, will we want to continue to have this set up moving forward for all board meetings in terms of board chair present, and utilizing GoToMeeting for social distancing?
I think you should plan on doing social media, keep doing it. Plan on doing the go-to meetings, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
If the chair is here, that's fantastic. Just as a point, a legal point, we do not have to have any of the commissioners present.
Okay.
Because
If
of
you-
the emergency declaration.
No, as long as you can be heard and hear, you can all be Timbuktu, UK, and San Diego if you
Cancun.
want.
I think I'm gonna stay here, please.
No, we've got you scheduled for Timbuktu. But it has been helpful, I will add, to have a commissioner in the building.
Mhm.
At least we have one commissioner is staying current. Not that you guys aren't and that you don't want to, but it is helpful to have a body in place. And it's preferable
I get that,
than
yeah.
having all three of you here.
Yes.
Okay.
And that might be something you all might want to talk about, maybe Tuesday, is rotating that duty.
Mm-hmm.
I think rotation, not specifically for this, but that's a good concept countywide. That just like Matt is rotating out of being acting county administrator, that we don't know what's coming. We don't know how many people we have to work with, and it does us no good to wear people out. Back to baseball, first or second inning, and this is a long game, and we have to be able to maintain essential services, and that takes people, and we need to take care of all of our citizens and all of our staff, and kind of we're all in this together and have to watch out for each
Sure.
other.
Here.
I think we've transitioned into other. Is there any other to go
Well,
over?
I'd like to share a little bit. I went online and decided to try the online shopping at Safeway. It proved to be very a little bit challenging. So we'll see if an order gets delivered or not.
Keep us posted, Annabelle.
The sheriff's office
Well-
has just been dispatched.
Okay.
We'll see if it gets
Hey, it's
delivered.
interesting, going through the process, boy, you pick things out, you pay for it with your credit card, now it has to show up. So we'll see. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Sounds wonderful.
Anything else for this meeting? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you for participating, and we'll do this again Tuesday of next week. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.